it up quite a bit. And that, to me, really destroyed the show to really encounter and get into. At that point, it wasn't reliant upon SpongeBob himself. It was reliant upon all the other things in the show. And, you know, they did well with that. I'm not saying that it was bad. It's just that really made it hard for me because they did that as a means to kind of, I think, other than maybe Tom Kenny's voice needed saving, which I completely understand. If I were a voice actor, I'd want to protect my voice. But I think it was also done just because they were really trying to cater to the younger audience, and after a while, that just caters to it better. It's kind of more whistly and beepy and stuff like that. What is undeniable is I think that the worst part of SpongeBob is the live action stuff. And, you know, I love Tom Kenny, and I love the show, and I love how they do what they do. But I just don't like any of the live action stuff. It just doesn't feed very well into the animation, and the animation is so good. Why not stick to what you're good with? But SpongeBob needs to be up there. Iceman talked about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This is one that got echoed by many of you later on. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is one of my favorite animated shows of all time. I, along with many of you who grew up in the 1990s, in the late 80s and the 1990s, lived, breathed, played, sang, watched, in every way, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And it's not just nostalgia talking here. It was a really ridiculous concept that they did very, very well. If you go and watch the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, I just think you will be taken by how it's still pretty cool. You know, I mean, after that they go downhill, I think, pretty badly. But that first one just really, in my mind, spoke to how ridiculous the concept was. But at the same time, it really did make it very cool. And I thought it did really, really well. And while it was a cheesy 80s cartoon, akin to many of the cheesy 80s and 90s cartoons, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is a cut above because it spoke to everyone, right? Everybody loved the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And we all had to have the toys, and we all wanted it, and we all needed to have it immediately. And I think that makes it one of the best. Excuse me. Chris Prangerade talked about Animaniacs. This one has to be up there. I could not agree more about Animaniacs. Animaniacs was just, and to me, Freakazoid fits right into this because Freakazoid really is a kind of offshoot with the same animation studio and the same great minds behind Animaniacs. And some of you mentioned Freakazoid. I think Animaniacs is better than Freakazoid, even though Freakazoid is awesome. But Animaniacs has so many of those different segments. It's kind of a variety show all in one. It took the concept of Tiny Toons and really made it into something much, 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 much better. I just loved that show. That is, to me, the quintessential show that operated on two levels. Adults watching that show would laugh their asses off. Kids that were watching that show laughed their asses off too, but they had no idea what was going on. It was just funny. Seeing them get beat up or hit on the head with, hammers, and, the nurse who was really hot, and, all the fun, Mittens and Mindy. Wasn't that it? Mindy? Anyway, Elmira. No, Elmira, that was a different show. Animaniacs didn't do that. They did Pinky and the Brain. That's what I was trying to think of. Pinky and the Brain. That was awesome. Pinky and the Brain had the best. And Pinky and the Brain, when it was an offshoot of a show, I didn't really like it as much. But my goodness, I loved Animaniacs. Great show. Absolutely worthy of conversation. Should be right up there at the top. Lashida talked about X-Men, the show from the 90s, which was very, very popular. The show that was dubbed on YouTube into making the Juggernaut bitch. This show in many ways really re-energized the superhero genre. I know that I really got into X-Men as a result of this cartoon. I was collecting the cards. I was, doing everything. I was buying comic books. I started doing all those things just because of the show, and the show really was very good. This show did not age very well, I will say that. If you go back and watch it now, it does look a little too childish. It doesn't really still kind of hit the same, I guess, notes that it did back in the day. I love the theme. The theme song from that show was just awesome. Still very hummable even today. You start humming even just the first bar of the theme, and people are going to know exactly what show you're talking about, especially if they happen to be our age. X-Men was a great show. It got me into X-Men. It was done very well in terms of action. It did so many of those things that I think Batman the Animated Series didn't do. It was very action-packed. And I think it probably would be in my top 10 all time, although it would probably be pretty close. I don't know that I would call it the best, but I think it's got to be up there. Mr. K mentioned King of the Hill, and this, King of the Hill is also, at some point someone mentioned that there were spin-offs and so on and so forth. Like The Simpsons was a spin-off of the Tracy Ullman Show, which is kind of a tenuous connection, but whatever. King of the Hill is a spin-off of Beavis and Butthead, which is again a Mike Judge show. So Mike Judge makes a few shows, some of them happen to be pretty good, some of them happen to be pretty bad. King of the Hill was a great show. King of the Hill really, I think, did a lot of really cool stuff. And I think it did a lot to kind of break down bias against, Southerners in the United States, but also helped to kind of people that maybe associated with those folks also have to break down their biases against people that were also very different as well. And I think this show really was about people, and it did such a great job at showing how relationships and people really get through their day-to-day lives, and it did it in a very comical way. And I just thought King of the Hill was masterfully done by Mike Judge, and I think the characters are fantastic. They are unforgettable, and the kind of Texas nature to it all really is pretty spectacular. And so I think King of the Hill absolutely belongs up there. There are so many great moments from King of the Hill. And I remember watching the very first season and just really being very taken by the show. It was really, really great. So King of the Hill is definitely worthy of mention. As I think, Beavis and Butthead, a few of you mentioned that too. I mean, I would not put Beavis and Butthead at the top. And Hank Hill is in Beavis and Butthead, although he's a lot older, and I think he's single, and he's driving his lawnmower around and just yelling at the kids all the time to get off his lawn. But King of the Hill takes that concept and really molds it into something that I think we can all relate to, and that is really cool. Let's see. Sand Coffin 69 talked about Courage the Cowardly Dog. This was an interesting nomination. I really like Courage the Cowardly Dog. I think it's a great show. Not sure it warrants mention as the best of all time. But I read the arguments, and you know what? I thought it might be worthy of mention. It was a really, really good show. Having known people that fit those kinds of caricatures, right? If you watch Courage the Cowardly Dog, you're going to see a lot of really cool caricatures. It's like watching I like to think of Courage the Cowardly Dog as being kind of Rocko's Modern Life 2, right? And I think Rocko's Modern Life probably needs to be up there too. I would probably put it higher than Courage the Cowardly Dog. But it's the same thing. You see these crazy, insane, overblown, melodramatic kind of situations, and what really nets out of it is you see some of the people that you know as best friends or people that you have dealt with in your family, and you look at them and you say, that is this person to me, right? Heifer could be in Rocko's Modern Life, or if we look at Eustace, for example, I'll use one from Courage. Eustace is kind of this crotchety old guy that really, barks a lot stronger than he bites, but is also really has, best interests at heart, doesn't necessarily see the world the same way that you do, but, has a heart and definitely cares. And I think, that kind of a caricature is something that we probably all can relate to in our lives. and Courage himself, obviously, with just trying to get along, just trying to go day to day, and really has a hard time doing that. In a very similar way, I should say, to Eek the Cat. Eek the Cat actually probably is the first iteration of Courage the Cowardly Dog. And by the way, Eek the Cat, in my mind, needs to be way up there. Eek the Cat, the Savage Steve Holland epic show, has to be, in my mind, in the top 10. I absolutely love Eek the Cat. Fantastic. None of you mentioned it. It's worthy of mention. John C. 911, another new first-time commenter. See, first-time commenters can make great, great, great contributions, guys. Futurama, the spin-off, not really a spin-off of The Simpsons, but done by the exact same animation crew, and started by Matt Groening as well. Futurama is one of my personal favorite animated series of all time. I tape every single episode that comes on my DVR, and I watch them religiously, even though I've seen most of them 3 and 4 times. And it still surprises me with laughing moments every once in a while where I'm just sitting there and someone says something and I just laugh. I just burst out laughing. I think that's the sign of a great show. This is a show that doesn't operate on 2 levels. This is not for kids, and I think that's one of the things that makes it really cool. Animated series that do things for adults that aren't stupid, like Ugly Americans, just dumb. And the one that came before that, like the reality show with the superheroes, that was just stupid. Drawn together. Just awful shows. Just filthy, terrible shows. But Futurama is the perfect balance. It's kind of got that nerdcore feel to it. It's got that Simpsons comedy element to it. It's got Billy West and it's got John DiMaggio, 2 of the best voice actors of our generation. Akin to Mel Blanc in my mind. These guys are just amazing, and to have them both in the same show just makes that show way up there in my mind. Futurama has to be one of the best animated series of all time, and with them producing new seasons now, and I think the quality is just as good as it's ever been. It's not like something more along the lines of Family Guy, which I would argue when it came back it was worse than when it used to be on the air. Futurama really is just as good today. I think it probably could, if it continues to run, rival The Simpsons eventually. Swellington J. Tips, my favorite name probably in all of the usernames that we have out there, talked about Looney Tunes. And thank God one of you talked about the Looney Tunes, because at the end of the day, I'm not sure anything, I mean this, I'm not sure anything we have suggested thus far or will suggest even comes close to the Looney Tunes. Now, I want to stop there by saying, not because every single Looney Tune was fantastic, and I know there were a ton of them, but there were some episodes of Looney Tunes, a lot of which they can't even show on television now, that were an active part of my childhood, that were just so hilariously funny, you just laugh and laugh and laugh when you saw them. And they show the watered down ones now, and they show the ones that aren't so good on TV, and I think they do Looney Tunes and the people that acted in them and the creators, all the way back. I think they do just terrible disservice to those folks, because Looney Tunes, even though they are now 60 years old, are absolutely hilarious, and in my mind are just as funny today. And by the way, the Looney Tunes show, if you haven't checked that out, on Cartoon Network, is absolutely hilarious and a tremendous update of the old Looney Tune concepts with very modern and contemporary spins on it. Check it out, guys. It's fantastic. So, thank you for suggesting Looney Tunes, Mr. Swellington. All right. Bob FM talked about Rocky and Bullwinkle. This is a good one. I mean, Rocky and Bullwinkle deserves consideration for the sheer fact that it was just tremendously good. I mean, it was one of those shows that meant to be educational first, funny second, right? It was, I think, of the all of the silly characters, the remarkable fast-paced nature of it all, where they were furiously working to narrate the story, tell the story, and get things through before the commercial breaks to make it fit. And it was just so funny. I mean, I remember watching one of those shows just thinking, how in the world do they say that many words in 10 seconds and still follow the narrative? It basically looks a lot like Speed Racer.